let's kick off. It's 3 minutes past 6, and as people join, I'm sure they can get with the flow quite easily. But for any of you that don't know me, I'm Tim. I'm a headhunter in the games industry, and pretty much as soon as I met IGA, I wanted to be involved because it's great that the work IGA does with people like your good selves, and I firmly believe it's the future of game dev. You know, without skilling people up and giving equitable opportunities for all, the games industry wouldn't iterate and it wouldn't continue to be a good thing. So I think, you know, if we can all keep pulling together and pushing it forward, games will get brighter for everyone. Um, I'm here to answer any of your questions relating to resumes, portfolios, job searching, career stuff. If it's within my knowledge base, I'm happy to provide that information. Um, these type of events will be kind of figuring themselves out as we go along a little bit, as it's our first ever one. And I do have a roster of subject matter experts who would be happy to come in and answer questions on specific events as well. So we can perhaps go through that bit later and see what might be of use for people. But first of all, I'm going to totally steal Willem's patter here. And can I get an emoji in the chat for how everyone's doing today? It can be either a GIF or emoji, but let's get some hype going. Straight in there with the Willem emoji. I love it. And I'm going to send my favourite one, which is the burning flames that remind me of Sauron. But yeah, I guess if everyone wants to start putting questions in chat, it could be related to your specific portfolio, it could be related to your resume or your job search, as I mentioned. I'll start to go through and answer those. This session is being recorded, but if anyone has a question they're not comfortable being somewhere on social media at some point, you are more than welcome to DM me either here or on LinkedIn, and I can sort of talk to you on a one-to-one basis. But yeah, please feel free, bombard me. See, seeing
People are also
Rachel
free
off
to
coffee for
come
a
off
week.
of mute too. So you don't necessarily have to just talk in the chat. If you're more comfortable, you can also
Yeah,
just come off
jump
mute
off me.
and have a conversation. But I think that's a really good point, Tim, and something that I was thinking about. Just as a note, yeah, this is being recorded. We will be intending on putting this on YouTube. So if there's anything personal, like if you want to have a resume reviewed, even if it's a group review, just make sure that any personal
Yeah,
identifying information is taken out, or if you are looking to have like a more one-on-one feedback or question that you don't want to ask in the whole group, I'm sure Tim will be happy to take it offline if you don't want it to be posted on the internet. So I guess that should be maybe a disclaimer that we put at the top of all of these when people are joining.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes it's a really nuanced situation. You might be like, "Hey, I'm talking to XYZ studio about this," and you might not want them to see that you've been talking to me about it, for example. So we've got a question in from Rick. What does an ideal LinkedIn look like for headhunters execs to see to understand your abilities? Um, so one of the things I look for in any LinkedIn profile is actually the detail. When people have filled out their LinkedIn fully, and LinkedIn usually prompts you to fill out your profile, that's very helpful. Things like your contact information, linking to your portfolio or a personal website, and also in your kind of overview of roles and experience, a lot of profiles tend to just be the job title and where you worked, which for me, as someone who's basically building an almost like an evidence case for why you should be hired, I can't really see what you've done, and that is it's an indicator for when I should message you. So if I can't really see any detail and I can only see where you've worked, I might send you a cursory message just to fill things out. But let's say you're doing 3D art, for example. You could say, I'm a 3D artist at this studio and I'm working on characters for, I don't know, an RPG game or something like that. It could just be a list of tech stacks that you're using. You could even just lift the first few lines from your job description. But really, what I'm looking for is the actual detail of what you do and what you can offer, because that will then go against my search checklist to see whether you're a relevant individual to reach out to or not. perhaps some information on how you prefer to be contacted. There was one very helpful LinkedIn profile. It was super duper filled out, had all the detail in there that I was looking for. But they also said, hey, I only check LinkedIn maybe once a year. You're better off messaging me on my ArtStation or my email address, which is here. So I could then just follow those instructions. It meant that communication was happening how the candidate preferred it to be sort of dealt with. And I was able to get in touch with them essentially. So just build your LinkedIn profile for who you would consider your target audience to be. If you want people like me, recruiters and hiring managers to reach out to you, make it easy for us to understand what you do and make it easy for us to get in touch with you. That's kind of ideal from a broad spectrum. The answer tends to morph and evolve over time depending on what job vertical you're working in and what I'm looking for at the time. But Rick, if that answers your question, let me know. If it doesn't, I can follow up with some more stuff. If you want an example of how a really filled out LinkedIn looks, you could always have a look at mine. Bear in mind it is very tailored towards kind of business development-y type stuff for game studios. But I've gone through every single section. I've asked for recommendations from people that I've worked with in the past. My contact info is up to date and you can access my website. So it's really sort of the best place to kind of find me. Wendy, I see you've got a question. Feel free to jump up or off mute and ask it.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, definitely.
Wonderful.
Sometimes when I get on these, it's really quiet and I don't know why. But anyway, something had just occurred to me when I was hearing you talk. Yes, I had a different question, but I think more importantly, in my mind, not being a recruiter and not having anybody besides people like you that I know online that are recruiters, what does that look like? Like, in my mind, like, I don't know, you get given, hey, go find somebody for this role. But where does that come from? And is that pretty universal? Like, is there variation between recruiters? Could you talk a little bit about that? I know that's a really big question, though.
No, that's absolutely fine. So I'll preface this with I can only really talk about the way I operate. It might be different to other recruitment agencies, and there's a lot of good ones out there. What tends to happen is I have a set list of clients, so studios that I have terms of business with who basically outsource their recruitment to me. I will have a call with their internal recruiter or a specific hiring manager who will give me what we call a job brief. So they'll go, Tim, we're looking for an artist. They need to do 3D modeling within, let's say, ZBrush, Maya, Blender, and be able to implement it into Unreal Engine. It needs to be in a realistic art style, and we're looking to pay a salary of, I don't know, £60,000. They have to be based in these type of countries because that's where we're configured to hire, and we're looking to hire within this sort of time frame. I will then ask them a series of questions, really getting into kind of what's the team size, what's the project, what are the deliverables. But essentially, I'm being given a shopping list. What I'll then do is I'll go onto LinkedIn, and I've got a LinkedIn recruiter license that lets me access a different set of options to a standard LinkedIn profile where I basically create a project workflow. I have a series of search parameters that I'll use, and that gives me a list of LinkedIn profiles that match those parameters. And then I go into each individual profile, read through it, have a look at portfolio websites, CVs if they're listed online, that kind of thing. And then from there, I can make a decision. Do I want to reach out to this individual or should I move on to another profile? So in a broad scope, I'm given basically a list of criteria to go after. I put that search and I'll also on other kind of software packages that I use that enables me to discover those profiles. Does that answer your question? Because I do tend to go off on one sometimes.
That's okay. So do I. Yeah, that does help. I mean, I guess I just always assumed different things about it, and just in particular, hearing your experience is super helpful because that gives me reason to make sure my LinkedIn is up. Kind of like Rick's question. How do you make that look the best? So yeah, that's perfect.
Exactly. It's a lot of it gets kind of lost in the weeds. There's a lot of info out there about kind of AI scraping tools being used to find profiles, and I'm sure those tools are probably being used somewhere. But essentially, it's like make sure your kind of job title is accurate and reflects what you do. I've noticed some people struggle to get discovered because they might have something like I saw one called a pixel wizard for a 3D artist, but they didn't fit into the conventional kind of organizational structure of job titles. So when recruiters are searching for roles, they'll use the kind of more common ones. So that's something to consider. But other than that, it's just kind of put as much information out there as you're comfortable putting out, relating to your job, of course, and that helps us find you. Essentially, we're kind of like sort of really boring detectives. it's my best thing for it. So just moving on now. I'm between jobs right now and work in the marketing world, wanting to break into games and do marketing there. I got a really promising email from a dream studio that said, "You were so close to being interviewed, keep trying. What do I do?" Oh, that's an interesting one. So thank you for that question, Margaret. What I would do in your situation, if there was a named recruiter who sent you that email, I would connect with them on LinkedIn, send them a personalized connect request, and something to the effect of, hey, I really appreciate the feedback, connecting to have you in my network. But I would probably reply and I would ask, hey, I really, I appreciate that. Thanks for actually coming back to me, because that's quite rare these days, sadly. Don't say that part. But I would ask them, what could have got you an interview? What sort of things should you be working on? Because while you are very open to sort of keep trying, I think it would be helpful to give you a bit of direction there. If I was the internal recruiter, I would come back to you and say, hey, you were nearly selected for interview. What made other candidates get selected for interview was X, Y, and Z. I would advise you to follow this kind of thing in future. We'd love to see an application from you then. But the fact that they've told you to sort of keep trying and they've bothered to come back and say that you were almost selected, that's a prime networking opportunity. You can probably get a conversation going with that recruiter if they're open to it, and see how much info you can get. My second part to that answer is, do keep trying. If they've been minded to actually send you an email saying you're almost selected, there's obviously some really good stuff there. So do send me a DM with your information if you're happy to. I do have a marketing and copywriting background. I ran a creative agency in that field a few years ago, so I can probably give you some tailored advice there on what might be good for you and where you might have missed out in the past, and we can try and tailor and iterate that together. I hope that answers your question, Margaret. But yeah, just drop me a DM and we'll look at that, because that's a less conventional situation to deal with for sure. Discord and are fine. What preferences? I do tend to be a little bit slower on replies on LinkedIn just because I get so many messages. So maybe Discord will be a bit faster, especially because I'm literally here right now. Next on the agenda, we have a question from Art Muse. So, in a writing portfolio, do you prefer to see selected projects, writing samples, or both? For example, my current freshly made portfolio shows my top 3 projects. Is it okay to share my portfolio? Yeah. First of all, yes, absolutely fine to share your portfolio in the chat if you're happy to. As we mentioned, this is being recorded. People will be able to kind of see this online, but yeah, if you're happy to share it, that's absolutely cool. And tell you what, let me have a look at this right now. Am I still here? I thought I dropped out then. So I personally, more information is better for me. The reason for that is I'm considered an agency stroke vendor recruiter, so I'm a bit like a freelance mercenary almost. I work for lots of different studios, and a lot of my job is not just finding candidates, but convincing studios that they should be interviewing the candidates. So by giving me more information on what you've done, writing samples, what project you've worked on, and that kind of thing, and making it fully rounded, it's giving me more kind of bullet points to illustrate why you might be a good fit. I've just opened your portfolio on another screen. So yeah, you've got links to the games themselves and where they are. Nice little bit of overview there. So that's great. What I'd like to see is maybe some specific examples of the writing in those games, if you're allowed to share that. I can see that you've linked your resume on there as well, which is great, and that's also laid out in my preferred kind of format. So it's got the detail. There's no kind of wild graphics or anything like that that could either mess with the systems that I use or just kind of overwhelm me visually. But it's a well laid out CV. I've got all of your kind of contact details there straight away. You've linked in your LinkedIn, so you're kind of relating it everywhere that I could find. You've listed your tech stack, languages. Yeah, this is a great CV. It's absolutely something that I would reach out to you about if I had any writing roles right now. What I would say of your portfolio, maybe have a second page with perhaps, an example of dialogue, if you've done any dialogue, any character bios, that kind of thing, just to kind of showcase where you live as a writer, if that makes sense. But yeah, I will keep an eye on your portfolio. If you can add those bits and bobs in there for me and send it when you're done, I will take a look for you and give you some further advice if you need it. But yeah, it's a great start. I just think you've got the nice overview there of the kind of games and projects you've worked on. If we can then look at the detail of how you write, maybe there's a little bit about your process there, especially if you're doing anything technical, like implementing narrative beats into a game or anything like that. As a recruiter, I would find that personally very helpful. Yeah, keep going with that. It looks good. Do I collaborate with contacts in regional developer networks to advertise job opportunities to people beyond who you are personally aware of? So I do advertise my job opportunities in various Discords, on my LinkedIn, things like that. In terms of how I find people, so it's not just me going through my contact list of, who do I know personally that could be a good fit for a role, because of the type of roles that I'm usually contracted to recruit for. They're very niche roles that have often been open for a long time because of a very limited skill set or a very specific requirement. So I'm often approaching people I don't know within my duties. So as I mentioned earlier, in terms of my process, using my kind of LinkedIn recruiter license and other methods, I'm actively looking for profiles that have that information listed so I can review those profiles, see if they're a good fit, and then approach them from there. A lot of advertising, it depends on the role. You can put it on various job sites like Hitmarker or Games Jobs Direct. They're just two off the top of my head, or Remote Game Jobs if it's a remote role. But also it's kind of embedding within sort of different communities, and if they have a function where you're allowed to post a job role and it's not against the rules or anything like that, I'll absolutely utilize those just to try and get the information out there to people. Does that answer your question? Please do follow up if I haven't answered it properly, and I'll come straight back to you. I'll have a brief coffee break, number 7 today. I'm going to be bouncing off the walls later tonight. My girlfriend's going to love that. Okay, so coming down now. I keep hearing from people cautioning me from going into games because a lot of the positions are contract or temporary. Thoughts? Invariably during layoffs and kind of economic uncertainty, a lot of job positions turn into contract or temporary roles, or something called a fixed term contract. The reason for that is it's companies mitigating risk. So rather than taking on a permanent employee who will have various costs associated with them that isn't just a salary, it might be sort of quote unquote cheaper to bring in someone on a business to business contract, because then you just send them a day rate and they have to do all the finances, the tax and all that kind of thing. But also it's kind of easier to end those job roles if the company gets into that sort of position. I'm never going to tell you that you should or shouldn't do something. I think you should always kind of weigh up those risks and experiences for yourself. But I would say if you're okay with, perhaps working a 6-month contract and then maybe getting a 12-month contract or a rolling monthly contract here and there whilst looking for a permanent job, that's absolutely an option. Equally, games will stabilize. Just none of us are certain exactly when. There's absolutely no reason why you couldn't wait it out, perhaps work in another industry for a little bit, keep skilling yourself up in games and keep networking, and then make a move when there are those permanent opportunities available. I have known contractors to be on a contract for several years at various companies, so it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be short. What I would do is always kind of question that in the interview. How long is this job earmarked for? What's the budget? What's the duration of the project? And weigh up whether that will work for your personal circumstances or not. But yeah, right now there's a huge increase in kind of contracts and fixed term. There's several studios that I know of that are hiring people on 12-month fixed term contracts. So it's almost the same as having a permanent employee. There's just an end date on that job role, and then at kind of the 9 or 10-month mark, they'll have a review, see where they are as a studio, and then issue another 12-month fixed-term contract. So that is something that's happening at the moment. It really does come down to what your personal preference is. Hope that answers your question. Let me know if I haven't. So just looking there. So okay, that's people talking about what portfolio site they're working on. Oh, how do you find Card Art News? Just reply in chat or jump on if you can. But if that's a good site that you found works for you, maybe some other people could use if they need to.
Yeah, I found it from, oh, sorry.
No, okay. No, go for it.
I found it from a fellow narrative designer friend. So he's worked in the industry before, and he is using Card for his portfolio site. So he recommended it to me, and I think Card lets you sign in using your Google account. That's how I use it. And it'll let you make a free portfolio site. And if I understand how to use it correctly, you can even make subpages. So for example, like I'm planning to make a new subpage for writing samples. And I believe that is possible with the free plan. They have a paid plan as well, but right now I'm just using the free plan.
Oh, that's really cool. No, thank you for sharing that, because anything that connects with Google Drive, I mean, I myself, I do a little bit of writing on the side. I'd find that quite helpful, so I'll explore that myself. But yeah, if you like the look of Art Muse's portfolio, check Card out, I guess. Not a paid promotion. I wish. So, just looking at Rick's reply, had a discussion with some local groups about a recruiter that reached out to me about a cluster of roles that are available, and I was able to direct 4 potential candidates to her. Some of the organisers were discussing keeping open lines with such recruiters to highlight opportunities for our devs. Yeah, absolutely. If you find recruiters that you feel are helpful and you work well with them, they're sources of information. But sometimes they'll pay referral fees as well if you help someone get a job. So that's always something to kind of bear in mind. It tends to be that most recruiters will have the latest news on the market, especially agents, because we're talking to pretty much everyone all the time and just finding out what's going on. So they can be really good indicators of just general information. So yeah, build those networks. It's all networking at the end of the day. A little thing as well, when you're connecting with people who are kind of a second degree connection, there is, I've found, a higher likelihood you'll get accepted. And if you add lots of recruiters, they're connected to everyone. That means more people in games become a second degree connection with you on LinkedIn. So that can be quite a useful tactic at times. I've got a question here from Roberto. Is it okay for me to showcase different types of projects on my work portfolio and LinkedIn page, or is it better to focus on one type of project? I think it's fine, personally. What you can do on your portfolio is separate it out by tab. So you've got different kind of headers for each project, and then recruiters will look at what they feel is relevant for them, but they've also got the option to explore sort of further. But I think anything that communicates who you are as a whole is very useful. If you're applying for a job that's really specific, and maybe you think there's only one tab that's specifically relevant, I would take the hyperlink from that specific tab and use that as your portfolio link. So then it's the most relevant information straight away for the recruiters or hiring managers to go, yeah, this is a great portfolio, let's take them to interview. But also it gives them that option to look at everything else and see how, fully rounded you are. So yeah, I would always lead with both feet forward, if that makes sense. I don't know if it does. I would personally prefer to see that information. Other recruiters might give you a different answer, but for my kind of trade and working with multiple studios, that tends to be the kind of the pathway to success. Okay, so looking at the chat, so I've got a question. Can I ask it live? Yeah, please go ahead, jump on. Oh, cool. Yeah, so with things like degrees and stuff like that, it's not a must to get hired by any means, but it's always, it's a good source of knowledge and a good source of training. Depends what kind of university you're at and what the course content you're doing is. I've met many people who have had great success after their degrees because it's given them that kind of bit of a rounded foundation in game development. Often you're getting kind of placements in second or third year at studios, and it just lets you kind of enter the industry. And you can also perhaps take advantage of visits that universities arrange at certain industry events and use that to build your network. I was at DevCon this year and I met a bunch of really cool students from a university in Germany who were all kind of 3D artists and animators. So I was just sat on a picnic bench, essentially, looking at people's portfolios on their phones, giving them some live pointers, and then we all added each other on LinkedIn. So, yeah, I would never say that having a degree would hamper you or anything like that. I think it's only a plus, but you're also not going to meet any kind of barriers if you don't have a degree. It tends to be about what can you do, what are your capabilities, and also what opportunities are available at the time. Of course, we've all seen the layoffs since the start of 2023. I think it feels like forever. It is harder for people who are trying to get in at the entry level right now, just because it's so competitive and there's not a lot of purchasing confidence from studios. That will improve. I have noticed signs of things improving over the last few weeks and months, and the data seems to be pointing that way. But yeah, I'd say keep cracking on with your degree if that's what you want to do, and just keep an eye on those job opportunities as well. Perhaps you can use your alumni network at your university or your lecturers' networks and see if there's anyone in games they could potentially connect you to, and just use that to kind of build up that presence, and that gives you kind of a good source of info for when you're ready to try and enter the market, essentially. Does that answer your question? You're very welcome. So next, as someone coming from outside games, definitely recommend looking up. Oh yeah, that's not a question, but a very good point, Wendy. Come to pitch night next Thursday. Yes, go to pitch night. I've heard it's a good fun time. If I'm free, I'll try and make it. Do you have any other questions? I think we're all good for questions, unless I've missed anyone, in which case shout at me. But yeah, I saw some great portfolios recently in sort of the art kind of sector, if that's the right word. And what I liked about them was they had very clear information presented at all points. Each piece of artwork had a really nice overview of what they had specifically done and what their process was. But also, there weren't too many pieces in the portfolio. They picked maybe their 12 or 16 absolute best ones. And that was kind of the sizzle, as you were, of the sales piece for their portfolio. So I could immediately see what they worked on. There was a good look consistency across the CV, but also I had the option of asking to see more work if I needed to. But often you'll find that art directors just want to see the best and most current pieces you've got. They might not necessarily be interested in stuff from maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So something worth considering if you're in the art vertical. But I remember that was something that really stood out to me, and I thought, hey, those are some good portfolios. Wendy, I think you're good to ask because I'm waiting on more questions. So come on up if you're happy to.
Okay. You know me well enough already. I always have tons of questions, but I try to make them things that are helpful to others.
Sure.
So I am fortunate enough to have a job right now, sadly not in games, but I'm trying to take what I wrote about just now, the transferable skills, and apply that to updating my portfolio.
Yeah.
It's wendypratner.com if you're bored.
Let me have a look. I'm not bored, but I want to see. So wendypratner.com.
Yeah, I think hopefully it's like.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, so it's education focused. But just I don't. Every time I sit down to do it, I don't know if it's just my ADHD, but I just don't do anything because I'm just overwhelmed by where do I start?
Sure. So what would you say is on your kind of to-do list for your portfolio? What are the things that you would really like to have done?
Examples like
Yeah.
work samples or work example things I've done. I'm trying to ride both lines between education and games because I want to get into games, but I have quite a history, over 15 years of experience in like learning and development kind of roles, instructional
Yeah.
design is what I do. So, I also really like doing like game-based education things. So
Yeah.
try not to pigeonhole myself, not just because of the state of the industry, but I really like my job right now, but always trying to keep things open and figure this is a good time to just kind of casually work on it and
Mm,
bring more meaning to maybe what I'm doing with IGA, and I'm hoping to take level 2 and kind of see where that goes.
sure. Okay. Um, so one thing you could consider, you've got your landing page right now, and if you're in chat, like do open wendyprantner.com. Have a look at it as I'm talking about it as well, because I can never share my screen on Discord without knocking out my mic for some reason, and I need to sort that out. But what you could consider, maybe you have like two main tabs, one for education, one for games, and then separate trees going down. So if someone wants to look at the more educational focused stuff that you do, they can go down that kind of list and look at that. And it would be the same case for games. In terms of kind of not knowing where to start, I have this issue too. I feel that we're probably coded quite similarly. So what tends to work well for me is I write out the task that I've got to do fully, like on a pad of paper, and I find that by kind of writing it out in as much detail as possible, I'm almost halfway through to solving it, and I mainly use that for when I'm writing stuff like fiction. Um, but if the main thing you want to get up is samples, maybe don't look at your portfolio site or anything like that. Just open a blank document and just put together a case study on just one of your projects or one of your samples. Have that fully finished, get yourself kind of happy with what you've done, and then look for where it could fit on your portfolio. And if there's no obvious place for it to go on your portfolio in its current structure, then that might be something you can use to then inform your design of the portfolio itself. If it were me personally doing it, I would have an education tab and a games tab, at the top of the parent trees, and then I would go down kind of in that vein. But you might find a way that works better for you. I also tend to. This is more how I just manage my own stuff, and it's not going to be the perfect way, but I usually wait for those kind of energy spikes and motivation spikes, and then I apply it to the specific thing that I haven't got done yet. But I mean, in terms of your portfolio in general, Wendy, it's very well laid out, and it's easy for me to read and navigate. Maybe just have a think about how your tabs work, and what makes sense to you in terms of presenting that information. But yeah, if you're struggling working on the portfolio every time you open up the editing function on the website, just do it in Word or Notepad or OneNote, where however kind of you like to process stuff, and just get the content done, and you can work out where it goes at a later point, but then at least it's done. And if suddenly that opportunity comes across your desk, you can kind of send them a Word document, go, oh, by the way, here's my samples as a separate attachment. Like it's not the end of the world if you have to do that whilst you're still figuring out the portfolio piece.
Oh, I really like that. Yeah, I really like
Yeah,
that. Yeah, doing some things that, just to get some samples out there so I can share and have it ready if needed. And
yeah,
then doing something like oh God, if I had to like PowerPoint or something like that, just to say, here's what it would look like. Cause, I think I'm worried about wrecking it because it works right now.
yeah.
The navigation structure is a little wonky, but it works. So if I did it in something else, that would give me that freedom to, hey, I can't wreck anything because there's nothing there.
Yeah, exactly. It's I write my fiction stuff, which is just for me until I finish it, and hopefully it will be out there. But I write in something called Scrivener, and that's where I kind of order it, and I get my perfect first draft looking good. But when I'm just kind of rinsing stuff out, it's in Word, it's on my phone, it's on a pen and paper, whatever I've got, and then I transpose it later. So yeah, like I call it mucking about, but muck about somewhere else. You won't break your portfolio or anything, but at least it's done. And like any big task, I liken it to eating a gigantic burger. You've got to do it one bite at a time. You can never eat the whole thing in one go, you know? So if you're ever stuck, just think about eating a burger. Take it one bite at a time.
I can handle that. Looks like we got some other questions, so thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome. Okay, so what are good methods to express your experience and ability in leading teams and coordinating processes to prove capability in taking on lead positions, short of just being credited in a leadership position on projects? That's a question from Rick, and thank you, Rick. That's a very good question. So there are a couple of ways you can do this. First of all, if you're using a written format, this could be your website, your CV, or even like an application form. Maybe write about some experiences where you've led a team. For example, if you've had a group of people working together on a common objective, talk about how you briefed them, you know, who needs to do what, how did you decide to assign those roles, what kind of discussions were had with the team? Did someone, you know, did you ask for volunteers and people kind of took on roles they wanted, or did you assign it based on what their skills and experiences were? What has been your experience in motivating and leading people to meet that objective? Did you conduct any kind of one-to-ones with individuals and help them go from point A to point B? An example I have, one of my employees, everyone I've hired at RightFinder had no recruitment experience or no games experience, and I trained them up myself. So I would, if I was applying for a job, I would talk about kind of how the individual was when they first arrived at RightFinder, what was the learning and development plan we put in place, how did I identify what specific the market need most enjoy and most vibe with, and then what were my actions to support them and enable them to get to that point. So it would be kind of evidential type of stuff for leadership. And you can use the STAR method to answer those questions. So STAR, if you don't know it already, guys, is situation, task, action, result. So the situation was I hired a brand new headhunter at RightFinder to recruit for games. My task was to teach them about the games industry and recruitment. The action points were I gave them an overview on the games industry and the type of roles that they would be looking for. And then I taught them about what a good recruitment process is and how to go out and find those individuals. Result, over a period of 6 months, you know, we had a regular weekly training session, daily check-ins on how they were doing, and within 4 to 5 months, they were working on roles and helping people find new jobs. That's just plucked out of thin air, me making it up on the spot, but that kind of thing would be a great evidence of your leadership ability. Really what leadership boils down to is motivating and getting people to achieve an objective together. You may have dealt with some interpersonal difficulties. If two people were arguing or disagreeing on something, how did you mediate that conflict? Who did you involve from HR if that was needed? And how do you kind of deal with that pastoral care? You know, it's not just kind of telling people what kind of work they're doing. You know, they might call up because they're not feeling very well or they need a day off or something. You know, it's all those kind of little things. But I would mainly be looking at your delivery and how you got your team to achieve the team objective. That's kind of the most important thing for me. But yeah, you know, you can be credited in leadership positions. I'd also ask for recommendations. If there's people that you've worked with in the past, maybe they've left your team to go elsewhere, they might be willing to leave you a LinkedIn recommendation. They'd be like, hey, Rick was an awesome leader and I really appreciate the kind of the help they gave. That's something I've left recommendations for old bosses in the past because I've really respected and admired them and appreciated what they've done for me. So I've reflected that. So yeah, STAR method, focus on what kind of the leadership was and demonstrate that, and try and get some recommendations if you can. Rick, if I haven't answered your question, please let me know in chat and I'll jump back on it. What does a strong production management portfolio look like? The physical work in pieces, images, summaries, etc. Especially, do I show them the Trello? So the top line answer here is make sure it doesn't violate any NDAs. I don't know what your personal or professional situation is right now, but what you don't want to do is show recruiter or another studio kind of, hey, here's our Trello of absolutely everything that we've done, because that could be kind of very sensitive information you don't want there. I would be talking about your general day-to-day process. How do you run a stand-up? What are the kind of things that you've dealt with on like a weekly and monthly basis? So, I mean, what blockers were you removing? How were you making sure that each of the different teams were doing what they were supposed to do? And this is very similar to my answer just now on leadership. I would be looking for STAR method write-outs about specific situations and how you worked as a producer. It's kind of harder to demonstrate. I mean, you can obviously demonstrate kind of projects that have been published and are out there that you've worked on, and you can talk about team size, how that was split out. Were you working with 15 artists, 8 programmers, and a couple of other people, or was it quite a small focused team? What I tend to look for is duration of project type, team size, and what you did and what was your frequency of actual production. So were you running a daily reflective and sprint, or was it more of a longer process where you checked in now and then? Were you mainly dealing with the actual delivery side, or were you more on the commercial side, and kind of, what were the things you were doing essentially? So it's going to be very star focused. It tends to be an answer kind of like how long is a piece of string. So I'd encourage you to send me a message on Discord or LinkedIn. We can have a look at your portfolio, and I can jump on Word or however we use it and add some comments and just give you some examples there. But mainly it's writing about what you've done and evidencing how you got that team and project to deliver, hopefully on time and within budget. If I've not answered your question, let me know. If you've got permission to show people the Trello and stuff like that, or you've got a draft Trello or a fake one that you've made up and go, hey, I can't show you the info, but this is what my Gantt chart looks like and all that kind of thing, that'd be cool. Just listen to your NDAs. Don't get in legal trouble, because it can get very expensive, and I personally am scared of lawyers. So yeah, Nick, let me know if I haven't answered your question fully, and I'll try and answer it as best I can in a minute. Do I think AI will replace most of the workers in the industry, or is it going to turn into tools which people will use to make things faster and easier? So, AI, it's a hot button topic, isn't it? In my personal opinion, I think that what will happen is you're going to get those companies that will try and replace everything they do with AI. That'll be art, that'll be code, and they'll put out some projects that might be okay, might not be okay. It really depends on the quality of the AI. If it's AI that has passed people's work and data without their permission, I think they're leaving themselves wide open to a form of class action lawsuit probably in the future. So I think any AI provider needs to be very careful. I'm personally of the opinion that it will turn into a form of tool that people will use to make things faster and easier. We're seeing that with ChatGPT. I mean, there's been a lot of new kind of copywriters springing up doing copy for companies who are basically just using ChatGPT or Claude or any of the other AI things out there. But I don't think it can inherently replace true creativity. I think there's always going to be a place for human beings in the creative process, and I think with it being such a new thing, a new technology that's figuring itself out, there are always going to be those lightning rod reactions, which is it's going to replace art fully, it's going to replace coding, but you're always going to need kind of humans to shepherd that, I think. I've been hearing for the last 10 years that AI is going to replace recruiters. We're still here. I think it's an interesting series of if-then statements. You're never going to replicate the complexity and uniqueness of a human being, in my opinion. So I don't think it's going to replace us. At least I hope not. And I kind of personally feel that AI should be doing the boring stuff for us and not, making music and drawing pictures and writing. That's kind of what we should be doing. What I'd love to see is an AI that I just go, hey, I've got this amount of wood, this amount of nails and stuff like that in my garage. When it hits 20%, less than let me know I need to go to B&Q again and buy some more because I'm building a trebuchet or whatever. It should be like a personal assistant in my opinion. But anyway, hope that answers your question. It's an interesting one. We just got to keep seeing what technology comes out and what happens with it. Just coming down now. Question from Robert. If I struggle to find a job as an environmental artist in games, what are some other jobs that are related to environment art? Very good question, Robert. A lot of it will depend on what kind of artist you are and what's within your personal skill set. I've seen a lot of environment artists transition into lighting and transition into props. So they can all kind of come under the banner of environment art, but you'll sometimes get studios hiring for very specific stuff. About 18 months ago, most of my jobs were just lighting artists because studios just could not hire them or find them. So they were all coming to me going, we need lighting artists. I once had a very specific brief where I was hiring a prop artist to work on medieval stuff, which was a dream role search for me because I look at all that stuff for fun. But I'd say probably your lighting, your props, a lot of environment artists kind of get into that procedural generation type side of things. You could look at that. You could look at materials. If you're good at the kind of organic side, you could have a go at kind of hair and grooming and that kind of thing. And just kind of, I'd pick an adjacent niche next to environment, work on that, and then just see if you can branch out from there. There's a good niche within kind of foliage and vegetation. Trees, rocks, cliffs, especially for open world games, they always need at least a couple of people to focus solely on that. So I think there are a lot of options for you. If you're happy to DM me your portfolio, I can have a look, see if I know of any roles that might be useful. I can at least give you some pointers based on your portfolio on what aspects I would like to see developed as a recruiter if I was going to be hiring environment artists. But yeah, just look at how it could be dialed in. Look at the available job roles right now. If there's lots of people hiring for, vegetation modelers or foliage modelers, for example, have a go at that for a bit. Lighting's a good one though. That tends to be a role I hire for more often, and I tend to only hire for roles that studios find difficult. So if you can corner a niche for yourself, you're always going to be in demand, essentially. Star sounds like a solid format. Yeah, it's a great format. I use it whenever I've been in interviews. I learned it what feels like decades ago. I think it was first told to me at school. And yeah, there's other formats out there. I think there's one called Style where you add learnings after the result. But yeah, it's a great basis. Is it okay for my resume to be more than 1 page long? Also, does the resume have to show only the work experience, projects, and skills that are relevant to the job position I'm applying for? So, Roberta, you're going to get a lot of different answers depending on who you ask. Internal recruiters will probably want to see 1 or 2 pages max with only the specific stuff relevant for the job that you're applying for. A kind of hunter-gatherer like myself, I will want to see kind of more. So what I would suggest you do is have a master copy of your CV with everything from the dawn of your professional life on there to the current day. And then what you can do is you can kind of chop and change that in a separate copy as you need to make a specific CV for a role you're applying for if it's direct. Kind of 2 or 3 pages I'd say is probably okay. I have once got a CV with about 28 pages because it was a very senior candidate, but all that said to me was they perhaps didn't know what was okay to send and what wasn't. They'd even included jobs from being kind of, in college at a side job 25 years ago, which was less relevant for what I was interviewing them for. So, yeah, don't worry too much about it spilling over into a second or third page. Just make sure everything in there has a purpose and is relevant. And if you think about it as almost like writing a bit of sales, you want everything on your CV to appeal to the person reading it and convince them to pick up the phone and call you or to bring you into an interview. That's essentially what a CV or resume is for, is to get you in front of the people making those decisions. I hope that answers your question. Let me know if I haven't. So coming down, Can you speak to progressive resume development? The star write-ups seem amazing to create as you go with each project retro. Specifically, do you have any insights on the rhythm of portfolio development? So, Rick, if I'm understanding your question correctly, my personal rule, and this was particularly prevalent when I was employed because I was in a very turbulent market for a while where a lot like now, people being laid off and things were just kind of generally on fire. I always, and I do this now even though I've run my business for the last 3.5 years, I update my own CV every 3 to 6 months. Not only does that mean that the information there's always pretty relevant, it helps me remember what I've done over the years, and I can write out each thing that I've done and the results I got and all that wonderful stuff. Have it in there so I'm not having to try and remember it at a time of stress. Because what I found whenever I was laid off or asked to leave was that I would be at a point of great stress. I would be super duper worried, and I'm a networker to my core. I'm a recruiter, so I'd message like 15 agencies and I'd be like, I'm available, get me a job. And I'd be kind of rushing to complete my CV and maybe adding kind of 2 years of stuff into it. And I could only really remember what I'd done properly in the last 3 to 6 months. So, yeah, in terms of the rhythm of updating, your CVs, your portfolios are living documents. They're never going to be finished until, you win the lottery and never work again or something like that. So, personally, I'd update every 3 or 6 months or so, but find a rhythm that works for you. Obviously, updating an art portfolio with beastie art, you might not be able to do it every 3 to 6 months because you're working on other stuff. But as long as you're of what you're doing right now, what have you achieved, what are your deliverables, what can you offer your next employer, and always keep working on it, it will be there for you when you need it. Because then, if the rug is pulled out from under you and a studio you're working at goes under or you're laid off or something like that happens, you can get to work instantly. Then you can message someone like me and go, Tim, I've just lost my job. My CV's up to date though. Here you go. Please help. That 24, 48 or 72 hour period that you save from having it done already could be the difference between you getting into an interview just before the job advert close date or not. So yeah, always have that up to date, I would say. Nick, I will avoid the lawyers. Excellent. Glad to hear it. Wendy, I want Tim GPT, lol. Yeah, that would be handy, wouldn't it? I think you'd get a lot of waffling though. Rick, create and sell asset packs. You know what? Great idea. Absolutely. Yeah, level design, that's a good one. Yeah, good stuff there. Nick, I visited at least 5 artist sites this weekend. Yeah, asset packs are a good one. I've used asset packs as evidence as to why a 3D artist should be hired, because the hiring manager was worrying about the quality of their work, and I was like, look, they've sold 100,000, furniture pieces. Like, it's good stuff. People are using it, so why not give them a chance and have a chat? So yeah, put it out there. It's all evidence as to why you should be hired. And also, if you've got a literal track record of people buying your stuff, you can be like, yeah, my work is commercially viable because it's already commercial. So go for that. Coming down now. Art Muse, you're completely right. Every creative starts out as a beginner. We were all level 0 at some point, and then we just work up over time. When I first started in recruitment, I had no clue what I was doing, and I'm very open about that. And now I have somewhat of a clue what I'm doing. So yeah, just keep going with it. Every single thing you do is adding to leveling you up. Roberto, thank you. I got to go now. Will this be uploaded on YouTube? I will leave that to the IGA to decide. Probably. I know they put some stuff on YouTube, but I would check with them because I don't make the decisions on where stuff goes. Let's have a look. I had to look it up to make sure. Oh, that's not a question. Sorry, I'm not catching up. Do you think gaming industry lack talented leaders and managers instead of talented individuals? I honestly don't know. I've not met every single leader and manager in games, so I couldn't comment on that. I think Tim's about to burn a bridge. I think the problem with games at the moment is we had such an artificial set of circumstances with COVID that everyone were at home buying video games, and the industry made a ton of money. Out of that, lots of business cases were made where they might not have been viable pre-COVID, but because there was so much money kind of sloshing around, it was like, yeah, found that studio, yeah, work on that game. Things are really good right now. As things have naturally contracted to kind of normal levels, i.e., no COVID, that's made a lot of businesses not viable and they've gone under. Whether that's the fault of specific leaders or managers, I don't know. I don't think we're lacking for talented individuals, though. If anything, we're getting more and more talented people by the day. The real lack that we're suffering from is available jobs and funding for jobs. That is improving, but we just have to ride this wave even further. I don't think we've seen the end of layoffs. If any of you are based in England, like I am, you'll have seen that we got hit by 2 major layoffs just yesterday. But there are more jobs coming out. I've certainly seen more production jobs on my side and things that I've been working on. And invariably with production, there'll be more roles coming up because they're working on new projects. So yeah, let's see there. But talented individuals, I don't think we're lacking for them at all. And I know for a fact that the IGA is doing a very good job of cultivating the next kind of cohort of talented individuals. So yeah, but I'd say follow the leaders and people you feel can lead you effectively for sure. Next question. What traits do the highest caliber game dev leaders demonstrate? The number one thing I look for is empathy. A lot of people would give you kind of the, how much money have they made and stuff like that. But I think if you truly want to lead people and look after them, I'm of the opinion you should be somewhat of a kind of a almost like that pastoral care servant leader type. These are human beings at the end of the day choosing to align themselves with you. So I look at how they treat them. Do they give them the tools that they need to succeed? Is the appropriate support structures in place to help them deliver? And also, how does that leader handle things like failure? Do they put the blame on the team? Do they put it on themselves? Is it kind of a situation where they kick work to people and just expect them to get on with it, or do they take that overview and that kind of mindset of looking after them? That's kind of what I look for in the highest caliber of leaders, because they tend to keep teams with them, so their attrition rate in terms of people leaving is very low. The people are happy, they're healthy, and they're loyal. And when I say healthy, I mean healthy as in like the work environment isn't toxic to them. And when you're in an environment like that with a leader that's supportive and understanding and this kind of does what they say they will do, you're in a much better position to make a great product, because you've got less barriers in place, less red tape, and you've got a bit more kind of bandwidth and focus. The best leaders that I recruit for all demonstrate that high empathy trait, and that's why I only work with studios that are good human beings. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Rick. Leaders in general need to have strong kind of moral compass, in my opinion, and stick to their guns, so to speak. When you've got someone that compromises and puts blame elsewhere and generally won't stick up for their team or the points that they're making, they tend to be less effective, I found. Just looking there. Yeah, Rick, you're completely right. The IGA is an amazing network. I mean, everyone here today giving up their evening to listen to me witter on. You could all add each other. It's a great exercise in networking here. Everyone has their own massive networks. Some might be a couple of thousand, some might be hundreds of thousands, but everyone that you connect to and speak with is someone that you can potentially gain value from. So yeah, embed in these networks. It's super useful. On your LinkedIn, you tend to get on the free profile, I think you get 100 connections a week that you're allowed to send out. It might have changed. Let me know if it has. But you could give yourself a little target of connecting with 20 people a day. Grow your network that way. It's a little target to work towards, and you're just slowly growing that network over time. And yeah, put your LinkedIn's in the chat if you're happy to be public. We're coming up for just gone 7 o'clock now. I've probably got time for one more question. So yeah, hit me in the chat or jump on stage if you've got one. and then I will release you. Loving the LinkedIns. I think I might have most of you already, but feel free to add me. I'm the guy dressed as a knight. But yeah, do we have any other questions, chat? So I've been hanging around with my nephews. I'm like, chat, is this real? What's an indicator that somebody isn't ready to be recruited? It depends on the situation. The easiest answer I can give is when I message them, they don't reply or they just say, I'm not interested. You know, that's a great indicator they're not ready to be recruited. But some of the things I look for, if someone has just joined a company, highly unlikely that they're going to want to move straight away. They could be just not at the skill level that I need. So if I'm looking for, let's say I'm looking for someone who's got a mastery of a certain tool set, and I've seen that they've only been using it for a short period of time, and they also don't have any kind of projects to back up their depth of skill, I probably wouldn't consider them ready to be recruited, but I would probably put a marker on their profile just to keep an eye on them. LinkedIn's got a function that lets you set reminders for the recruiter licenses. So I have come across someone's post where it says, "Oh, I've just started learning Houdini." I think, "Oh, I'll check in on their profile in a year, see how they're getting on," and that's kind of my way of building up intelligence. But yeah, a lot of the time they'll sort of tell you. They'll either tell you directly or indirectly whether they're ready to be recruited or not. For me, because I spend so much time doing outreach and attraction in terms of posting out adverts, it's really, if they choose to engage with me, they at least in themselves are ready to be recruited. Just depends if the client feels that way as well. I am effectively a middleman. So I hope that answers your question. It's quite a nebulous topic, to be fair. So I would probably need an hour to go into it fully. And one more question if anyone would like. Otherwise, feel free to return to normality. Just what Nick's typing.
This has been amazing, Tim. I just want to say thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Wendy. Thank you. And thank you all for coming. Lovely to have you here for the first takeaway. So yeah, let's round it off here. I've got one or two DM messages that I'm going to get to today, tomorrow as well. Feel free to send me a message. Otherwise, enjoy your afternoon, stroke evening, stroke morning, and I will be back on Thursday, the 17th of October, for the next kind of session. So come with questions. Tell your friends if they'd be interested in this kind of thing. And otherwise, thank you for coming tonight. It's been lovely to hang out with you.
Thank you so much for doing this. This is
All
fantastic.
right. I'm going to jump off now, but add me on LinkedIn or send me a DM if you need anything else. All right. See you soon.